Well, I'm sitting here in my office in Omaha, and every once in a while I stop and think about how unlikely all of this really is. Not just the money, not the company, not the headlines. I mean, the simple fact that I'm still here, still waking up in the morning, still reading, still curious, still learning. I turned 94 this year, and I'll tell you something, when I was younger, that number would have sounded impossible, like something that happened to other people. And yet here I am. And when you reach this age, something interesting happens. You stop thinking in quarters and years, and you start thinking in chapters. You look back and realize life wasn't one straight line upward. It was a series of lessons, many of them learned late, some learned too late, and a few that only make sense once you've lived long enough to see patterns repeat. That's why I want to talk to you, especially if you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, because that period of life is misunderstood. People treat it like the beginning of the end, like the closing credits. But it isn't. It's more like the second act, the part where the story actually deepens, where the noise fades and the signal gets clearer if you're willing to listen. When I was in my 50 seconds, I thought clarity came from information, more reports, more data, more thinking. And don't get me wrong, thinking matters. I've made a living doing it. But clarity doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from knowing what matters less. That took me a long time to understand. Looking back, I see a man who was productive, disciplined, focused, and also distracted. Distracted by the illusion that everything important was urgent. Distracted by the idea that opportunity was scarce and had to be chased. Distracted by work that felt meaningful but often crowded out what was irreplaceable. I loved my work. I still do. I built a company I'm proud of, Berkshire Hathaway, and I'd do much of it again. But I would do it with more space, more room for people, more room for presence. Because presence is something you don't realize you're missing until it's gone. I remember evenings where I was physically home but mentally somewhere else, reading annual reports, thinking about capital allocation, replaying conversations in my head. At the time, it felt responsible. It felt necessary. But responsibility without balance quietly becomes regret. If you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, you still have the chance to correct that. Not perfectly, but meaningfully. Let me tell you something important. Life doesn't suddenly slow down because you want it to. If anything, it accelerates. Years start passing like months, months like weeks. And if you don't consciously decide how you want to spend your time, it will be spent for you by habits, expectations, and inertia. That's why this stage of life matters so much. You are old enough to know better, but young enough to act on it. That combination is rare. Money looks different with fewer years ahead. Now let's talk about money, not because it's the most important thing, but because misunderstanding it creates unnecessary fear. And fear, at this age, is expensive. When you're younger, money is about growth. When you're older, money is about alignment. Alignment with your values, alignment with your time horizon, alignment with your peace of mind. I've watched people in their 50 seconds panic because they think they're behind. They compare themselves to someone else's highlight reel and conclude they've failed. That's nonsense. Financial lives aren't standardized. They're personal. The real question isn't how much you have, it's how much you need to live the life you want without anxiety. And that number is often lower than people think. Compounding doesn't stop working because you had birthdays. Mathematics doesn't care about regret. It only cares about consistency. If you invest steadily, avoid catastrophic mistakes, and give your money time, it will do what money has always done in productive systems. It will grow. The S&P 500 didn't become valuable because it was exciting. It became valuable because it represents businesses solving real problems over long periods of time. S&P 500, that's why simple investing works. People underestimate boring. They think boredom equals stagnation. In investing, boredom often equals success. At this age, your job isn't to be clever, it's to be durable. Durability beats brilliance. The most dangerous word. Catch up. One phrase I wish people would erase from their vocabulary in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds is catch up. The moment someone believes they must catch up, they stop thinking clearly. They take risks they don't need. They confuse urgency with opportunity. They swing harder instead of swinging smarter. That's how people blow up perfectly salvageable financial lives. You don't need to double your money. You need to not lose it. Loss is asymmetrical. A 50% loss requires a 100% gain to recover. That's easy math, but it's devastating reality when time is limited. So if you're listening to this and thinking about speculative investments, exotic strategies, or once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, pause. Ask yourself whether you're investing or reacting. Reaction is expensive. I've always said investing is simple, but not easy, and it becomes emotionally harder as the stakes rise and the timeline shortens. That's why structure matters. Automatic contributions, low-cost funds, a written plan. These things protect you from yourself when emotions run high. Time is no longer abstract. There's a moment in life when time stops being theoretical. You stop thinking in decades ahead and start thinking in years behind. That moment usually arrives somewhere in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds. And when it does, it changes how everything feels. You notice your body more. You notice fatigue. You notice loss. Friends retire. Some get sick. Some disappear from your life quietly, without drama, just distance. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. And realism, properly understood, is freeing. Because once you accept that time is finite, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. You stop arguing to win. You stop working to impress. You stop saving for a future you may never live. Instead, you start investing in now. And here's the paradox. People who embrace finiteness often live more fully, not less. They travel with intention. They speak honestly. They forgive faster. They don't postpone joy. Health is not a side project. I've been lucky. Genetics gave me a long runway. But luck is not a plan, and biology always collects its dues. If you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, your health decisions now are not about aesthetics. They're about functionality. Can you walk comfortably? Can you sleep well? Can you move without pain? Those are quality of life questions, not vanity metrics. Money without health is a theoretical asset. It looks good on paper and fails in practice. I know people with millions who would trade it all for pain-free movement. That's not a figure of speech. That's regret speaking. So take care of yourself, not obsessively, intentionally. See doctors, move your body, eat reasonably, rest without guilt. Longevity without vitality is not a victory. The quiet loneliness of success. Here's something people don't warn you about. As you age, especially if you've been successful, your world can shrink. Colleagues retire. Friends pass away. Conversations become shallower. Success can isolate if you don't actively maintain connection. That's why relationships matter more now than ever. Call people first. Show up. Listen more than you talk. Legacy isn't built at funerals. It's built at kitchen tables, in ordinary moments, repeated over time. People won't remember your net worth. They'll remember how you made them feel. A different definition of wealth. At 94, Wealth is waking up without dread. It's having people who answer your calls. It's curiosity that hasn't died. The richest people I know are not the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones with the fewest regrets. And regret usually comes from postponement. Postponed conversations, postponed trips, postponed honesty. If you're waiting for the right time, understand this. The right time is rarely comfortable, it's rarely convenient, and it doesn't announce itself. You choose it. When people talk about retirement, they usually talk about money, how much you need, when you can stop working, whether the numbers will last. And those are fair questions, important questions, but they're not the hardest ones. The hardest questions about retirement have nothing to do with spreadsheets. They're questions like, who am I when I'm no longer needed in the same way? What does a good day look like when no one is scheduling it for me? What gives my life shape when deadlines disappear? I've watched a lot of people reach the finish line financially and then feel strangely lost. Not unhappy exactly, just unmoored. Like they'd been training for a race their whole lives and suddenly discovered there was nothing waiting at the end except silence. That's not a failure of planning. It's a failure of imagination. For decades, your identity is reinforced every day. Your job, your title, your routine. People call you because they need something. Your calendar tells you where to be. Your responsibilities give your days a kind of gravity. Then one day, that structure vanishes. And if you haven't thought about what replaces it, the freedom you worked so hard for can start to feel like emptiness. That's why I don't believe retirement should be an event. It should be a transition. You don't stop being useful just because you stop being employed. In fact, usefulness becomes more powerful when it's voluntary. Some of the happiest people I know in their 60 seconds and 70 seconds still work, but on their own terms. They consult, they mentor, they teach, they volunteer, they build things no one's paying them to build because they want to. They're not chasing money anymore. They're chasing meaning, and meaning doesn't come from leisure alone. Rest is important. Travel is wonderful. But permanent leisure, without purpose, gets old faster than people expect. Humans need to contribute. We need to feel like our experience matters. If you've spent 30 or 40 years building skills, learning hard lessons, making mistakes, accumulating judgment, why would you throw all that away at 65? Your value doesn't expire because your paycheck does. One of the best things you can do in your 50 seconds is begin designing your post-career life intentionally, not in vague terms, in practical ones. Ask yourself what kind of days energize you. Ask yourself what problems you enjoy solving. Ask yourself who you like helping. Then start small. A few hours a week. A side project. A conversation. A commitment that gives your time direction without stealing your freedom. Because the goal isn't to stay busy, it's to stay engaged. Now let's talk about something people worry about more than they admit: running out of money. Fear of outliving your savings is one of the most common anxieties I see in people in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds. And it's understandable. For the first time in your life, you're facing a future where income may stop but expenses won't. The solution to that fear isn't perfection, it's realism. Most people overestimate how much they'll spend in retirement. They imagine constant travel, non-stop activity, endless consumption. In reality, spending often declines with age, especially after the early retirement years. The bigger risk isn't spending too much. It's planning without flexibility. You don't need a plan that predicts the future. You need one that adapts to it. That's where guaranteed income streams matter. This is why programs like Social Security Administration exist. They're not meant to make you rich. They're meant to give you a foundation, something that shows up every month regardless of markets, headlines, or bad luck. When to take Social Security isn't a math problem alone, it's a life problem. Yes, delaying increases your benefit. That's a fact. But life doesn't always cooperate with spreadsheets. If you're healthy, still working, and don't need the income, waiting can make sense. If you're tired, burned out, or facing health uncertainty, taking it earlier may improve your quality of life dramatically. There is no prize for dying with the highest monthly benefit. The right decision is the one that reduces stress and increases freedom for you. And the same principle applies to pensions, annuities, and other guaranteed income sources. Predictability becomes more valuable as time horizons shorten. Volatility is exciting when you're young. It's exhausting when you're older. Peace of mind has a return. It just doesn't show up on a statement. Another thing people struggle with at this age is letting go of who they used to be. That sounds abstract, but it shows up in small ways. Hanging on to roles that no longer fit, resisting help, measuring self-worth by outdated standards. I've seen people refuse to slow down even when their bodies are begging them to. They see adjustment as surrender, but it isn't. Adaptation is not weakness, it's intelligence. The people who age best aren't the ones who fight change the hardest. They're the ones who work with it. They adjust expectations. They shift priorities. They accept assistance without shame. Independence is admirable, but isolation is not. One of the most valuable assets you can build in your 50 seconds and 60 seconds is community. Real community. Not networking, not acquaintances, people who know you well enough to tell you the truth. As you age, that circle naturally gets smaller. That's normal. What matters is that it gets deeper. Invest time there. Relationships compound just like money does, but they require consistent deposits. And unlike financial markets, they don't crash unless neglected. Now, let me say something that might make you uncomfortable. Many people use work as a way to avoid dealing with their inner life. Work gives structure. It gives distraction. It gives a sense of forward motion, even when nothing else feels settled. When work fades, whatever you've been avoiding has more room to speak. Unresolved conflicts, unspoken regrets, questions about meaning. This is not a crisis. It's an invitation. You finally have the space to address things you were too busy to feel before. Some people fill that space immediately with noise, travel, consumption, anything to avoid silence. But silence isn't the enemy. Unexamined life is. Your later years can be the most honest years of your life if you let them be. Honesty with yourself about what you want. Honesty about what you no longer care about. Honesty about what you still hope for. And hope doesn't have an age limit. I've learned that joy changes form over time. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, but deeper. It's not adrenaline anymore. It's contentment, not excitement. Satisfaction. That doesn't mean settling. It means aligning. If you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, this is the moment to simplify. Not to shrink your life, but to clarify it. Say no more often. Say yes more intentionally. Protect your energy. Energy becomes more precious than time. You start to realize that every commitment has a cost, and not all costs are financial. Some cost peace, some cost health, some cost relationships. Choose carefully. One of the greatest gifts of aging is perspective. You've seen cycles, booms and busts, trends come and go. You know that today's panic is tomorrow's footnote. Use that wisdom. Don't give it away to fear. Markets will fluctuate. Politics will change. Technology will evolve, but human needs remain remarkably consistent: security, connection, purpose. Design your life around those, not headlines. I'll tell you something else I've noticed. People who age well stay curious. They read, they ask questions, they listen. They don't cling to being right. They're more interested in understanding. Curiosity keeps the mind flexible. Flexibility keeps the spirit young. The moment you decide you've figured everything out is the moment growth stops. At 94, I still learn things. That surprises people. It shouldn't. Learning isn't preparation for life. It's participation in it. So if you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, don't retreat from the world. Engage with it differently. You don't need to run as fast. You don't need to prove as much, but you still belong. And finally, let me say this clearly. You are not behind. You are exactly where you are, with the tools you've earned through experience and the time you still have. That's enough. Enough to make better choices. Enough to repair what needs repairing. Enough to enjoy what you've built. The later chapters of life aren't about accumulation. They're about appreciation. And appreciation, properly practiced, turns ordinary days into something quietly extraordinary. You know, when you reach this stage of life, people expect you to have answers, final answers, clean answers, wisdom wrapped up in neat sentences. But the truth is, life doesn't work that way. What you gain with age isn't certainty. It's perspective. You stop needing everything to fit into a perfect story. You become more comfortable with complexity, with contradiction, with unfinished chapters. At 94, I don't see my life as a series of achievements. I see it as a series of choices, some good, some poor, most made with incomplete information. And that's true for everyone, whether they end up wealthy or not. What matters isn't whether you made every right decision. What matters is whether you learned from the wrong ones and whether you use that learning to live better afterward. If you're in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds, you're standing at a rare intersection. Behind you is experience. Ahead of you is still enough time to act on it. That combination is powerful if you don't waste it worrying about what you can't change. One of the most destructive habits I see at this age is replay. People replay old mistakes like a bad tape loop. If only I'd invested earlier. If only I'd worked less. If only I'd chosen differently. But regret is a poor teacher if it turns inward. Its only value is forward motion. You cannot relive your past, but you can redeem it. You redeem it by doing better now, by showing up differently, by making choices aligned with who you've become, not who you used to be. And that brings me to legacy. People misunderstand legacy. They think it's about money, buildings, names carved into stone. That's not legacy. That's residue. Legacy lives in people, not objects. It lives in the values your children absorbed without realizing it, in the way you treated people when no one was watching, in the calm you brought into tense rooms, in the kindness you extended when it cost you something. Long after your bank balance is forgotten, those things remain. That's why I believe the most important conversations you'll ever have in your later years aren't with lawyers or advisors. They're with family. Talk to your children, not just about money, but about life. Tell them what scared you. Tell them what you got wrong. Tell them what you wish you'd understood sooner. They don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be honest. And if there are things left unsaid, say them. Pride has a terrible return on investment at the end of life. Apologies, on the other hand, compound beautifully. They heal not just the past, but the future. If you've lost people, and if you've lived long enough, you'll understand this next part. Grief doesn't fade the way people tell you it will. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, less sharp, but it never disappears. And that's okay. Grief is not a problem to solve. It's evidence of love. I've learned not to rush it, not to suppress it, and not to let it harden me. Loss can make you close your heart or open it wider. That choice is yours, even now. One of the quiet dangers of aging is emotional contraction. People narrow their world to avoid pain, but avoiding pain also avoids joy. The two are inseparable. Staying open is a risk, but it's the only way life stays rich. Another thing worth saying plainly: you don't owe the world endless productivity. Your worth is not measured by output anymore. It never truly was. Rest is not laziness. Enjoyment is not selfishness. Saying no is not failure. If this message resonated with you, if it made you pause, reflect, or think differently about your money, your time, or your life, then I hope you'll stay with me. These conversations matter, not just about investing, but about living well, aging wisely, and focusing on what truly counts. So, if you haven't already, please like this video. It helps more people find it who may need to hear it right now. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future reflections, lessons, and long-form discussions like this one. Thank you for spending your time here with me. Time, after all, is the most valuable thing we have. I'll see you in the next one.